So I'm seeing a very concerning trend among the way that members of the Church of Christ are approaching politics. And I think the state of affairs has been we leave politics out of the pulpit. We don't necessarily always express political opinions. Some, again, will definitely uh, have no problem expressing them, others are a little bit more reserved. I want to have a conversation with someone who, and don't get me wrong, is a conservative politically. And I think the key is we let our understanding of the faith and we let our understanding of morality and ethics guide our political decisions that we make. I think we're all saying that. I think we're all holding to that. And ultimately, there is a overwhelming majority, I think it's safe to say, of members of the Church of Christ who lean toward a conservative political party, the mainstream of one of the two parties. As far as other parties besides Democrat and Republican, we can, that's a separate conversation. Whether voting for some other party is a matter of a waste of a vote or conscience, I don't want to get bogged down in that. We have two primary political parties. Majority are going to hold to the Republican Party. I have no problem with that. I'm a registered Republican. I have my issues with the Democratic Party and big issues, like we all do. Um, what I'm seeing is when people get involved in politics, what they tend to do is to turn a blind eye to problems with their own party. And when their own party does things that they would criticize the other party for, and untethered from Christianity, morality, I think we would expect that, and that's going to enter the conversation. I never thought I'd be doing a review of a podcast from members of the Church of Christ. On my Substack, I responded to Jack Wilkie's article that he had posted about immigration and ICE and enforcement. And I don't really want to get involved in that. I thought about writing something about Christian nationalism specifically, but I'm not well versed enough in politics to really give anything other than my opinion. If you look at the Christian Chronicle, I know some people say the Christian Chronicle is too liberal, and others say, well, they're just reporting what's going on. They're not making a judgment call one way or the other. I'm not, again, getting in that debate, but the two sides of the opinions, one is that, it's perfectly right to enforce borders. And I think we all agree with that, because the contrary side in Christian Chronicle was, ICE agents are going too far. They don't have authority to do what they're doing. And I think that conversation, that opinion's getting dismissed. And I'm not here to talk about that. I've already responded to that. I have a problem with Christian nationalism for a lot of reasons, but I definitely have a problem with something from Focus Press. And I don't even know how much of these views come from Jack. They come from Will Harab or whoever. I'm just going to play the video and share it, and I'm going to make some comments because of some of these talking points. I've already addressed one of them, and I'll readdress it again. But regardless, give me one moment. Yes, share audio.
Mine is, I don't
So
know,
this is our number
maybe
three
one of
for
number
today's
three,
episode, right?
for today's, yes, so number 7 total, I guess. Or 8, sorry, rather 8 total. Political issues and political divides. I do think that when we think about threats, I hate bringing politics in. A lot of people just get very like, oh man, we can't talk about politics. We're going to have to talk about politics. And I think that's my point. Those that want to steer clear of political issues are missing the boat for the people that are coming to church because of natural political issues like Charlie Kirk. We could say that's not a political issue, it's a human issue. It absolutely is a political issue because you had some people cheering it and you had some people mourning it, a lot of people mourning it. And what was the divide? Politics, right? You have the left and you have the right. And people look at it and go, well, I don't identify with those. It's like, you're going to have to, because that is the party that absolutely is condemning everything he said that has led to the political violence where somebody is shot. We have people rushing back into church. We made this point on the last podcast, but we have people rushing back into church because of Charlie Kirk's death, his assassination. We have to be able to handle political issues in the church. And we have done the kind of monkey where you close the eyes and the ears, the mouth, like, we don't want to have to think about it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to do any of those things when it comes to politics, because we just preach Christ from the pulpit. We don't preach the elephant or the donkey. We preach the lamb. You're going to have
I'm sorry. I don't understand the critique. I understand the critique to an extent. I think there's a lot of people who say, the gospel and Christ is the focus. I didn't really plan on commenting on Charlie Kirk. I touched on that in my article, but I do want to say, like, the idea that there are either people who mourned Charlie Kirk or people who cheered for him, I think that's an oversimplification. And it wasn't Democratic leaders who were saying, oh, he got what he deserved for, supporting gun laws. Like, that was radical social media, just people responding to that. And I take issue with that as much as I think any of these gentlemen would. What surprised me in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk was people defending him. The two reactions to Charlie Kirk among the Churches of Christ, I think, were both problematic. One was, well, he was a New Testament Christian, so he's not saved. Whether, again, not even saying that's not true, I'm just saying that's not the best way to respond to tragedy. People acted the same way when Phil Robertson died. And I don't think that's the message that's going to win friends and influence people, regardless of the truth of it. And again, I'm speaking off the top of my head. There's nuance to that. But the other was, oh my goodness, this is, people just started talking about how much they liked Charlie Kirk, respected him, and they wanted to identify with him. I don't have a problem with you identifying him as far as his politics, other than I was making some claims like, I think that's going to alienate a lot of people. There are a lot of people who understood Charlie Kirk was bigoted, and whether that's right or wrong, to start associating yourself with that it's going to, win some friends and influence some people who like Charlie Kirk, but it's going to turn people off to those who don't like him. And I think there's some legitimate concerns in a lot of his talking points and a lot of his politics, and just the state of conservative politics as it stands now. I'm not going to go into that, but I think it's an oversimplification. And to be able to welcome people who, into the body of Christ, who both supported and didn't appreciate Charlie Kirk, I don't know why we have to take a side on that. I don't know why we're putting this hurdle in place that, oh, we need to speak out against politics and be vocal and be this and be that. And I think that's the key part of the conversation. But I'll continue because I don't want to focus on that particular aspect.
To get used to preaching against the donkey a lot more. Some people are already doing it. We're going to have to. No, you cannot be a Christian and be a Democrat and support the Democrats. You can't. We'll come.
Again, that was the main reason I wanted to make this video. You cannot be a Christian and Democrat. I understand why they're saying that. I understand how they reason to that point. What New Testament authority do you have to say that? That's my problem. And I think that's their problem. You can say, well, Democrats support this, and this is immoral, therefore I can't support them. But again, if that's the case, if we and we all have our understanding of what issues are more important or what issues are more weighty when it comes to a political party. Like, there are things about a particular political party I don't like. Let me try to organize my thoughts a little bit better on this. and this is connected. A lot of times recently, I've talked about, is it ever okay to tell a lie in order to protect a group of people? And I was really surprised to hear there are members of churches of Christ who say, well, no, you can't do that. You can never lie under any circumstances. I'm like, okay. As a student of philosophy, as a student of ethics, and these sort of conversations, I just find that hard to swallow. And if we can't choose the lesser of two evils, there comes this need. If you're in that framework and mindset, I think the connection is you can't say, well, Republicans are the lesser of two evils. They even say they're not even going to entertain that idea later on. Like, no, we're not going to say both parties are corrupt. We're not going to say that. We're not going to deal with that. I don't see that as being, to me, that's partiality. To me, that's a problem. And my biggest gripe, I think, is if this is a Christian doctrine, then it's universal, then it's worldwide. To me, this just kind of smacks like KJV onlyism in a way. And I'm not trying to poison the well. I'm really saying, like, you have to use the King James Bible. Well, what do Spanish people use? Well, they speak Spanish. They need to use the Reina Valera. Well, the Reina Valera has the same problems you have with other translations. Like, you have this rule, but it doesn't seem to apply to anyone outside of those who speak English or outside of this country. There is no Republican and Democrat party in every country. And again, not all countries have political parties, but are you going to go through and analyze every single country and say, well, this party is the closest to the Republican Party, and therefore that's the party you should be a member of? I think it's just short-sighted and myopic. That means the same thing, I think, if I'm using the right word. We're not seeing the church as a universal. It bothers me when people want to debate, do you wear your Sunday best to church? Like, that is an affluent American problem. These tribes that get together and worship on Sunday morning and afternoon in Africa probably don't have more than one set of clothes. And we want to debate, where did Sunday best come from, and this, that, and the other. If you're going to make it an issue, if you're going to make it a principle or a rule, I think you're missing the point. I think you're not looking at Christianity as a worldwide universal religion. You're limiting it to country and culture and making rules about it. And that might be beside the point to a lot of people. Like, what do we do in our country? What do we do in our reality and our culture? And I don't see this as anything but divisive. I don't see this as anything but you can have reservations about the Republican Party, and you can go a certain route. And, with some nuance, it's not as if there aren't Democrats who oppose abortion, but just don't like the legal restrictions. And that whole topic, I'd like to write an article about that, just to deal with that, because I don't think a lot of the political jargon is honest about the issue. And I don't have time to explain what that means right now, because I'm focused on just this. Is this the right statement that Christians should say, or is this a divisive statement? And I want you to just think about that and think about the scope of it. Moving along.
Right out on this podcast and absolutely say, it doesn't mean you have to be Republican. It means you cannot support a party of death, a party that pushes transgenderism, pushes abortion, pushes euthanasia, pushes assassinations on, and is cheering assassination attempts, things like that. Well, they cheer the assassination of those in Minnesota. First off, that didn't happen. Second off, that whole situation is very screwy with how it happens. Very, very messed up in how that took place. People weren't cheering the political assassination of those that took place in Minnesota. They were absolutely cheering the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're dealing with unhinged people right now, and the church is going to have to get hip to that and be willing to discuss political things, be willing to wade into it. Doesn't mean it goes over Christ. It means Christ is ruling over our political affiliation as well.
This is literally just propaganda. I'm sorry. There were people on social media that were cheering or pointing out the irony. it's ironic, one founder of Turning Point was a COVID denier who died of COVID. One founder of Turning Point argued for gun laws, and he was killed by gun violence. Like, there's an irony there, regardless of whether you approve. And it was definitely too soon that people were making that connection immediately after everything. I mean, in hindsight, we can look at that and say, yeah, there were some bad things that were being done. But just to say, oh, the Democratic Party was cheering. No, no, they weren't. No leaders, no one on social media who is a congressman or is a senator is going to support political violence, because it swings both ways. It could go one way or the other. And we're going to say, no, we don't do that. We're not part of that. That's fine. I'm sorry. I'm getting bogged down in the things I didn't want to talk about. But this is literally just political propaganda being set forth as if it's biblical or ethical. And I can't stand it. Moving on.
We have to be willing to discuss this, to get into the nitty gritty, to have these conversations with people, and to address political issues, because that is what's driving people to church right now. And so it doesn't mean that every single Sunday is political hour. We need another Daily Wire show from the pulpit. We don't need that. What we need, though, is people that are willing to take bold stands on political issues. Here's what Christ has to say about it. Here's how the gospel rules over ICE and rules over, this newest video from Matt Walsh, or this newest video from Don Lemon, or whatever it may be. And the reason this is important, I'll open up to you guys. The reason this is important is, you think of something like, speaking of Don Lemon, him going into the church, persecution is coming. These people just walked into a Baptist church in Minnesota to protest. Things could have gotten very bad from there. Tons of people could have gotten hurt. If somebody had opened fire, who knows? Political and religious are starting to become like this. They're starting to be tied. The fact that it walked into churches, Jack made a great point. I can't remember if it was on X or on Facebook, but a great point about this is where it starts. When you look at the French Revolution, when you look at what took place in Spain, the Spanish Revolution, it started with them going after priests, them going after clergy, them going after church members. This may be happening again. The church is going to have to get hip to this and to prepare its members of, like, this may be coming. Here's what we do in this situation. So yes, we're going to have to think about politics in a way that we've long been pushing off, so as to appease people. It's time to stop appeasing people that are on the left and start realizing you are either for Christ or you are against Christ, and one political party is absolutely against Christ. So, and there's no, well, both are bad. No, there's one whose platform is death and destruction and everything against God. So it's time to get off the fence on it.
This is the second time I've listened to this, so I'm kind of reacting to things. I didn't realize how bad they were the first time I heard them. We're not going to be allowed to talk about both parties being bad. We need to, the message is, we need to have a conversation, but then, we're not going to entertain these ideas. And I don't see it being possible to do that. I wrote that review. I talked to Jack about it through social media, obviously. I tried to challenge him on X or Twitter, and that conversation, X is a garbage dumpster fire of political, what's the word? Just dividing people. And I know TikTok can be the same way. I have mystery on TikTok, and I try my best not to get too political or things of that nature. But this is the very thing that I'm trying my best not to do. Is just, in one hand, you want to say we want to have conversations, and the problem with having these conversations is we don't always come to an agreement, and we don't always come, to terms with everything. And I struggle to think, Christian nationalism being an option is something we can just agree to disagree about. But even if it is, we can have that conversation and try to think of, again, I want to still have that conversation. I think a lot of these ideas need to be challenged for a number of reasons. But this is just emphasizing this first, you can't be a Christian and a Democrat, which unsustainable and just inherently divisive. And I turned on to this podcast recently. I understand a lot of what they say is good. A lot of what they say is, we've been kind of isolationist and stuck in our own Church of Christ culture for so long. We need to change things. We need to engage. We need to be more careful. But then this is just so problematic. Like, I understand engaging the culture, but engaging the culture in this way, I think, is just going to do more harm than good. Moving toward authority, moving toward power, like, the rest of everyone else is wanting. I'm sorry if I'm speaking too much. Let's move on.
I do think, I'm sure Jack's got a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll go ahead and go. I do think we have got to move away from making anything that's tangentially politically related taboo. From the pulpit, even in Bible classes, one of the things that I really appreciate about both you guys and another one of the guys that was teaching on the rotation with us on Wednesday nights is if there was something news relevant that very much applied to biblical principles, and to give the qualifiers that we probably don't need to give, but will, like, you don't need to have every class be a news reel recap essentially, but there's something relevant, we'd cover it and say, how does this apply to our Christian life? How does this apply to our Christianity? How does this apply to God's word? A lot of churches don't do that because of the taboo, because of the, you don't really want to bring politics into it. And so, Joe, I agree with this addition because I think we've got to, once again, just move away from that idea that anything even remotely politically related, we just can't touch because, there's strong feelings on both sides. And to your point, I think we're at the point where we need to say there might be strong feelings on both sides, but we need to make sure that we're united on one side. We don't need to worry about both sides. We need to worry about which side is the correct side, and that's the side we're going to align ourselves with. And, man, talk about friction that we were talking about earlier. Talk about kind of uncomfortable conversations. Talk about maybe some awkward classes, Bible classes, discussions, meetings, whatever it is. I think the more that we just shy away, the more that our congregations, not to keep making this a young person, old person thing, but specifically young people, will turn to other outlets for their answers. Will turn to other outlets for their, how do I handle this as a Christian? Again, ICE or immigration in general, or, any number of political issues that are being thrown our way. The more that the church just says, hands off, we want to stay away, like, let's just not talk about it, the more they're going to look somewhere else. And I would say the lower our numbers are going to get. And it's not all about numbers by any means. But, man, as we've said 1,000 times, Christians want to know the things that they see on social media, the things that are impacting their lives. How does that apply to being a Christian? Like, what precepts from God's word apply to this? We got to be ready for that as it applies to politics. So I think this is a really good addition, Joe. Jack, I'm sure you got some thoughts. What would you say on this one?
I mean, I forgot what I wanted to reference. It's just this idea that we need to pick the right side on this political divide. And I think there's truth to what's being said. There's absolute truth. Like, we need to be able to talk about political issues. But if we're talking about, some nuance within a conservative political view, and you're saying this is fine, I'm saying this is a little bit too much, there should be some more checks and balances. Like, we can have that conversation and disagree and walk away and be brothers. I think a lot of the times we make political views doctrine. My friend Zach, I'm glad he's watching. This live is a bit spontaneous, so I didn't expect a lot of viewers. Denver Cooper, if you don't know who that is, West Virginia School of Preaching, great godly man. He used to say there is too much work to be done in the kingdom to be worried about politics. And I'm not saying we can't wear two hats. I'm not saying we can't do whatever, but I have no problem with speaking about, obviously from the pulpit, it should be the Bible, it should be the gospel, it should be doctrine. We should be able to call out ethical issues without, hey, this Republican did this, it's immoral, without offending all Republicans. This Democrat did this, it's immoral, without offending all, whatever. I'm not saying that Christians can't get involved in politics. They should be in every level of government, doing the right thing as much as possible. How that actually plays out, how compromises go between parties. Again, that's not for me to decide. I'm not a super involved in politics, but if we're going to take ethical issues, if we're going to be divisive about this, then we're missing the boat. Yes, we need to be able to have these conversations, but it's not, well, let's argue and debate on like what the right party is to support, or the only party to support, or how we deal excuse me, how we deal with these things. Can we in either party hold to the same faith and the same ethical issues, or any other party that we might think about? I need to wrap this up, so moving on.
Yeah, there was that stat, the one about 80% of people want to hear a sermon on immigration from their preacher. That you might say, oh, people don't want politics from the pulpit. They do. And the other side of it is they want to know which side you're on to know whether they want to align with you. And so I think at the heart of what you're saying here, Joe, is we have to just give up the delusion of unity. We're not united. Because somebody is going to hear us say, I'm behind ICE and anti-immigration stuff. And this Facebook friend was posting about how they're the Gestapo. They're the Nazi police out there doing this stuff. And it's like, I'm sorry, you and I aren't going to see eye to eye. And if we don't see eye to eye on this, you say, well, then we're being divided by politics. No, there's something way under this. It's morality. It's familial ties.
Worldview.
It's a totally different worldview because
understanding. Yeah, power structure.
Yeah, hierarchy.
I almost posted this on Facebook yesterday, and I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. But I'm the first to say ICE is not the Gestapo. Again, this is not the topic I want to discuss. I agree that immigration policy should be held in place. If the law changes, if the borders are less restrictive, I would never say open the way that people say open. So be it. I'm not saying ICE is the Gestapo, but if your talking point is they're following orders and they're on the side of law and order, then I need to hear more from you about the distinction. Like, why would you support ICE for that reason, but not support the Gestapo for that reason? And you'll say, oh, it's not racially motivated. Like, okay, but the idea that, well, you're either completely devoted to a left idea or you're devoted to the right, and there's no spectrum or mode in between. This is why I can't particularly stand this narrative, this propaganda. But going on.
Hierarchy. This is law enforcement. This is the nationality. Can nations even exist? And all of those kinds of things. And also, like, these people out, they're strapping a baby on their back, going out in 15 below zero wind chill to protest. Like, I'm sorry, you're going to go do this for criminals and risk your baby? You're deranged. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. And it's the thing about the heat map of the Ordo Amoris, right? Like, I love my kids more than I love people from all over the world, and that's okay. But they're looking at us, I got to love everybody equally, which means risking my 18-month-old for these people. How on earth are we supposed to get along? And so there's just dozens of guys still running around going, well, we just can't let politics divide us. Or you'll see if we actually talk to each other, we'll find we have more in common than we. No, these people in Virginia, we talked about this at the time, the guy running for attorney general, those texts leaked. He wanted his conservative opponents' children dead. Said maybe they'll change their minds if their children died. And they elected him. Like and somebody rushes in, we got more in common than we. No, they want, because the kids he wanted dead were kids of people who believe like the three of us do. So he would say the same about us. I don't want anyone's kids dead. He wants my kids dead.
Just for sake of time, like, I'm seeing a lot of, these protesters brought their kids to freezing cold temperatures, therefore protesting is bad. Therefore protesting isn't protected by the First Amendment. What are we? And there's ways to protest. We can get into that. But there are some extreme, Democrats or people on the left who want people dead. And therefore the left is big and scary. And I'm not saying that we should support those things or say that those things are right, but we could do the same thing with the Republican Party and with the right and with a lot of conservatives, and say, there's a lot of conservatives that are, completely far right and completely racist and everything else. And that might be the narrative from the left a lot of the times, just on the political divide. That's fine, but we can do better. I don't know if there's anything else I need to comment on, but let's listen to a little bit more.
we're not on the same team. And if you want to align with him against me, I'm gonna have to take you at your word. Okay. And so that's the thing that I'm really just getting sick of, is all the people going, you know what, if we just stop paying attention to politics, we'd be united. No, the underlying things, as you said, Will, that are under every that the politics is the surface level thing. There's a million assumptions and ologies underneath this that lead to this.
Well, here's the thing.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys have thoughts.
I do.
Here's the thing. If you remove a political party from it and start talking about it, because all these people are like, man, you can't just preach political parties. Okay, so let's remove Democrats from the situation, liberals. Let's just say you got a buddy who's turning transgender, and you are fully in support of this. How does the church respond to that? How should the church respond to that? Or you have a woman who's considering abortion. You're fine with it. You're willing to help pay for the abortion. And how should elders respond to those things? We look at it and go, absolutely not. The elders need to step in and go, man, you can't support that. That would be a sin, and you'd be wrong with it. Why is it not the same when you're supporting a political party that you know is going to push this upon millions of people? I don't understand how you're not complicit. That's why we vote. And I don't understand how elders can't get involved on situations like this. And I'm glad you said that, Jack, of like, man.
This is a really great talking point. It'd be a great discussion to have. The oversight of the elders and everything that goes on in the nation. I just don't see how we don't see those things as separate. I don't really have a lot to say about that. I think it's clear how the church deals with it internally. And again, I think the answer that they're giving is, well, how do we deal with this at the nation level? Well, we have to take up Christian nationalism. I want to see if there's anything else I need to respond to.
And politics divide, like, no, it is speaking to the political divide is speaking to much bigger issues. And with everything that you're talking about, there's so many different things, and it comes down to, do you respect God and his rule? And right now there is a party that just does not. They don't respect rule in general because it's owned. We've done a critical race theory. We did that one. Not critical race, critical theory is run by critical theory, which is all about power structures and things like that. Who's the power structure that they're really raging against? God. We know that. And so when they are rushing critical theory into schools, they're rushing it, all of these, the power structures of big bad ICE coming in to shoot these.
There's a larger conversation I don't feel qualified to have. We put a lot of things as conservatives. I'm put myself in that. I know I don't really identify with that kind of conservative, but we're going to put critical theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion and wokeness all in the same category. And a lot of times we brush a lot of things under the rug that we really should stand for, like being against racism, being against treating people differently because of disability. And that's a really great conversation I want to have, but I don't feel qualified. I've tried to talk to some local ministers who are African American to speak on the race issue. They don't even feel qualified, maybe outside their own experience. And it's a difficult conversation to have. We saw some conversation, I think some compromise after the Charlie Kirk debacle, and a lot of questions that came up. I don't think we're there yet, and I think a lot of this just gets swept under the rug. If it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's justified or not, it's under wokeness, it's under critical race theory or critical theory. I think we're throwing some good things out with the bathwater, and that's not what I came on here to speak about, but you can see how we like to lump everything together into a left basket that's bad top to bottom, and we oppose things that we shouldn't. That's my concern. I think the same would be true on the other side to some extent, but moving on.
Poor innocent people, like, well, first off, they're not innocent, and second off, they're trying to keep law, keep order here. And if you don't see it that way, I don't know how we're going to be able to get past this. We can say, let's be Christians, and the moment that something controversial is brought up, you think that I'm Satan, or you think that I'm Hitler and are calling me a Nazi. How do those two things come together? They don't.
This is the product. My dad, growing up listening to him, he had several lessons, and he made put a big emphasis on this idea of a worldview. And so, maybe just listening to him for, a decade plus has instilled that in me as well, or ingrained that in my head. This is what you get when you have 20, 30 years worth of a church that did not instill a Christian worldview in their young people. This is how you can have people who sit in the same pew, social media friends or whatever, that would both call themselves Christians, serving the same God or whatever, that can be fundamentally opposed on some of these really, really important issues, voting different ways. And again, we can look at and go, how on earth can you get to that conclusion? And they can look at it the same. Guess what? It's because from the time they're 5 years old, they were not raised with the same worldview as a faithful Christian is supposed to be. We told people, hey, get into the church, the rest will work itself out. Instead of, no, this is a worldview that you must instill in them from the time they're 5 years old. And so again, I had a youth group of 30 people, bunch of different worldviews going on, from for 13 to 18-year-olds at that time frame. I'm sure you guys can say the same, as opposed to, no, there's one Christian worldview that we're trying to, and it applies to everything, it applies to politics, to entertainment, to raising kids, to getting married, to making money, all these things. We haven't done that in the church for the last 30 years. And so it really should not be a shock, in my opinion, that we're getting to this point that you're speaking of, both of you guys, about, again, we sit in the same pew, but man, how on earth can you support that? Well, it's because you haven't had the worldview that I've had the last 30 years. So again, like, maybe that's pessimistic, but until we get back to teaching and again, bringing up these young people with not just again, get to church and the rest will figure yourself out, or make sure you know this, all of you guys always talk about what is the worldview that we're supposed to have? What is the Christian worldview? And it cannot be a choose your own adventure. It cannot be a buffet. I mean, you just have to pick what you like. And if you want to, if you want to support support illegal immigration, go for it. If you want to support, abortion under some circumstances, go for it. Like, no, you don't get that option. Well, the problem is we've given people that option for the last 30, 40 years in churches. And so this one to me is a product of that.
Politics aside, there's been so much among churches of Christ, and these are the conversations I'd really like to have. If you don't believe in young earth creationism, then you're not a Christian. You don't subscribe to a biblical worldview. Again, I can be a young earth creationist and a conservative and all these things and still say, yeah, I don't think you have to have that to be a Christian. I don't think you have to be clear on your eschatological position on the nature of the new heavens and new earth to be a Christian. And again, those are just two things that are very divisive. But for what reason? And what's the basis of that? Those are things I just don't feel the need to address in a public ministry, because the focus is gospel and sound doctrine, like clear and sound doctrine, like doctrine that's clear and distinct, and not, well, this is the way I think this plays out. Anyway, that's a pet peeve, and I think that attitude has kind of perhaps crossed over into the political aspect, where, oh, well, you have to have these doctrines politically to be within a Christian worldview. You have to have this expectation for government. Maybe that's part of the problem, is we're not willing to agree to disagree on certain issues. And we're not doing a very good job of drawing the line where these are matters of faith and these are matters of opinion, which is the very same topic we're having here. Like, your political affiliation, is it a matter of faith or a matter of opinion? Is it right to say you should be a member of this party, or is it just divisive? And I think a lot of those other conversations are good and healthy. I think this conversation is good and healthy, but this is just propaganda and shutting down the conversation more so than actually trying to have it.
It really is. And I want to just clarify before we move off this one, what we're not saying here is Christians can only be unified if they agree on every platform or that,
Right.
that you have to just be mindless cheerleaders for one party.
Echo chamber, sure,
yeah, none of that at all. In fact, there's plenty of room for disagreement within these worldviews. But that's to me, it's just so crazy. Like, what Democrats and Republicans used to get along. Like, well, yeah, we didn't used to have to argue over if men could use a women's bathroom. Like, yeah, it's a lot easier to get along when it's little things, when it's tax rates and stuff like that. That's not what we're doing here. And so if you get it back to that spectrum, yeah, we can agree to disagree. But that's not the spectrum anymore. It's literally, the reality is the political spectrum. And I don't know. But again, people are going to hear this and go, they view their news channels, they're on the other side. So how can you believe in that? Exactly. I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me. What do we even do from there?
So that's the conclusion. I'm just really taken aback and flabbergasted that this kind of thing can fill the vacuum. And it's easy for it when we haven't spoken about politics for so long. This seems like, okay, yeah, this is the right answer for a lot of people. But there's a conversation that needs to be had. And the question is, do you have to be a Republican to be a Christian in America, which is a very strange and limited scope of like this doctrine? Or is that divisive? And I'm all for having conversations about nuance, and they seem to pay lip service at the end to like, well, we can be conservative and have disagreements. But I think we're not being honest about where the disagreements are. Like, some conservatives are saying, ICE is right to do what they're doing 100%. Others are saying ICE is right to do what they're doing, but they're not doing it in a legal way or correct way or a moral way. If we don't look at it from the perspective of the ICE agent, of the immigrant, of the protester, and what rights they're guaranteed and how they should come away from that situation, then we're just being partial. And I hate to use that, and I know that's divisive. I know that's controversial, but it's topical, and it's really what got me onto this, like, this really weird place where I normally don't speak up politically because it's so divisive, it's so emotional for a lot of people. But this is not the answer. It's not Christian nationalism. It's not, you can't be a Democrat and be a Christian. It's about again. I know that I'm probably going to be dragged for this. To me, it makes about as much sense as King James onlyism. It's just a very limited view, and I'm getting some more comments. Let me answer this before I go. Change the hearts of people in the gospel of Christ, unite them to Christ, and we can hope to result lifting up godly politicians. That's been my saying all along. Always room for disagreement, yet every time there's conversation, it turns violent and partisan. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing. There's room for conversation, there's room for disagreement, as long as you agree with us on these core things. And I understand why we would do that religiously, but I don't understand why we do that politically. And I agree with you, Zach. That's kind of the way that I've looked at it. If we can change hearts and minds about the gospel and about these ethical issues, then it's not a matter of like wanting the government to do that for us or this, that. And that's a deeper conversation. I don't mean to simplify it. Last comment. When I think of Jesus and the apostles, many of the prophets, they were not aligned with anyone but God and God alone. Yeah, that really... what this really comes down to for me is if you can't be a Democrat and if you can't vote for a Democrat, and maybe that's a different idea, but like, how bad would the Republican candidate have to be for you to say, I'm not voting for Republican this election? And I don't think people are comfortable answering that because they've made these arbitrary distinctions. I wasn't planning on talking about that or bringing up that challenge, but that's really what it comes down to. Like, if the Republican candidate was like really bad, I'm not comparing anyone to Hitler. That the Hitler came up. I hate that everything and anyone that you disagree with is Hitler, and I agree with their reservation. But it almost seems like if he did run on a Republican ticket, that you'd be obligated to vote for him because the Democrats are evil. Now you say someone on the Democrat side is worse, sure, but if not, then what's your option? Are you even obligated to vote? Like, if you don't choose a lesser of two evils, then both candidates are evil, both parties are evil. Then there's been years I haven't even voted because and this isn't about me. This is about my position or my understanding. But we get in these ideas and we don't really think them through or look through the challenges. Like, if it's you have to vote, then that's telling someone what to do according to their conscience. I'm going on for too long. I'm ranting. This was not an intended structured conversation. I'm just reacting to what I've seen, and I find it to be very problematic. And I'm not saying we go back to the way it was where we don't talk about politics. I'm saying we need to talk about politics in a way that is, among Christians, among churches of Christ specifically, that is gracious, that is, if we can't find points of commonality and we're only focusing on the disagreements and we're only focusing on the extremes, then, that's the negative aspect of politics that we shouldn't be partaking in. We shouldn't be changing the narrative we shouldn't be constantly changing the narrative. We shouldn't be locked into a narrative when more evidence comes out, which is the way social media tends to go one way or the other. We should just be having conversations and trying to work things out. And I'm not saying the pulpit's the place for that. That was another thing I didn't think to bring up or forgot at the moment. If you tell someone who to vote for from the pulpit, then my understanding is you've forfeited your tax exempt status. You've become a campaigner for a political candidate, and you're no longer should be qualified or classified as a tax exempt institution. I said that in Bible class. Like, we have our moral guidelines. We have things we should do. I can't get up in the pulpit and preach it, and we're fine with that. We can bring up these moral issues and talk about them. We're fine with that. There's room for nuance. There's room for a little bit of disagreement on political, national, and even some of these ethical issues with nuance. But I've gone on for too long. It just really bothers me that this is the primary and only voice that we're getting when it comes to, well, I'm a member of the Church of Christ. What do I do with politics? And I'm no expert on politics. I'm not, super well read and constitutional law. I've just organized my library. I've got books, left and right about rights and the religious and constitutional law and all these sorts of things. But I am just going to end it here. I really appreciate any opportunity I get to have a conversation, to give some pushback. I really want to open a dialogue because I just don't think that this is healthy, just to have this propaganda and stuff going on. Even though we agree, probably 75% of the time when it comes to political things, and I must say probably more than that. I'd say even 80% of the time. I just have a huge problem with this. It's divisive. It's not helpful. And I don't think this is the way forward. I think conversations are the way forward. I think we need to have those conversations and be dispassionate about them. Again, I'm not attacking Jack. I'm not attacking anyone on the show. I'm just saying these are ideas that, when you mix in these little ideas in your message that aren't so good, it kind of demeans the message as a whole. I'm not saying we're wrong about our conclusions, about where we stand, but we can be wrong about some of the ideas we're setting forth along with that, and some of the propositions we're using to reach the conclusion and fill out our argument. If we don't approach this carefully, I think we're going to go off the deep end into another direction that's equally dangerous. That's just my 2 cents. I'm not an expert. I just don't feel like this sort of thing needs to continue without some sort of challenge or conversation happening. And have a good day. God bless. Think on these things, pray on these things, and have a great day.